Hey everybody, welcome back to Keeping It Real with Tiff and Carl. I'm Carl Raven,
And I am Tiffany Salcido.
and hope you all are having a wonderful week or had a, getting to the end of the weekend, in the end of the week, right? Tiff, this isn't the question, but what's your favorite day of the week?
Friday,
Friday?
Friday, Friday. I love Friday. I like Saturday too, but Friday is my favorite day. I feel like you look forward to Friday all week long, and I just like Friday. Friday is always my favorite day. I don't know why. Even if I have to work on a Friday, I still like Fridays. Fridays are cool.
Yeah,
Friday fun day. I don't know.
yeah, cool, cool. Yeah, mine's
What about
Thursday.
you?
Thursday.
Thursday.
hmm
Why Thursday?
Well, I think it's because I used to look forward to Fridays, especially
Hmm
working
hmm
for the county. We had every other Friday off. So my Thursday was like Christmas Eve, right? So I always look forward to it. Um, I try to have minimal load of stuff to do on a Friday uh these days. And so, I look forward to it. Yeah, I kind of see it as the beginning of the weekend is that Thursday, right? So we're just on the way home from whatever it is I'm doing Thursday. Okay, so Friday. Yeah, I mean, and I have stuff to do on Fridays, but that Thursday, definitely. And also maybe because when I was a kid, Thursday nights were the night, the best TV shows were on and things like that. So, that was a always something to look forward to, right? So, which kind of leads me to my question for you today. Think about TV shows like growing up. Was there a TV show you watched growing up that you wished you could have been part of that family or that group of people? What's a TV show you grew up with where you're like, oh, I want to be like them? My high school girlfriend wanted to be a
Right.
90210. She said they don't have a black
Yes,
character. They could just have one black character. I would be that, and I would totally know how to interact with everyone, and we would get along. So,
that's fun.
mhm.
That's funny. I'm gonna go with Sabrina the Teenage Witch. That would be a family. I always wanted to be a witch. I always wanted to have magical powers and be able to, do spells and stuff like that. But I also just liked the family, right? Because they were family witches. So I would say Sabrina the Teenage Witch. What about you?
you know, thinking about where I would want to be. I really got into understanding the past high school, right, and I'm thinking about a different world, right? I
Oh
always
yeah, okay.
just that life, college life, HBCU life. I mean, I was going to college, but not HBCU, but just understanding, you know,
Mhm.
the things that people were going through. I was their same age, and so I was feeling it, and it definitely was something that, and I kind of, I don't have many regrets, especially as a child, because we're here now, we're doing all right, right? But I think if I would have had to do over again, I probably would have went away for school, and
Mhm.
for college, just to be able to get away from. I mean, I was away from school, but I was close enough, right? So my computer went out. I was at Davis, and my mom was in the Bay Area, and she was able to come up and reprogram my computer for me in the same day, right? So that's how
Mhm.
close I was. I still went to my orthodontist. I had orthodontist appointments once a month. I come home and do those things, right? And see my high school girlfriend who was in my freshman year girlfriend and all those things like that. But if I had to do it over again, I might have went away for school or maybe even joined the military. I don't know. It's just a what if. It's an interesting what if. So yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. I didn't go right to school. I mean, I did and I didn't. So I had kids right out of high school and started living like a grown up. I went to community college, but it was again local
Mhm.
community college. I went to school at night, was raising kids. And so I didn't get into higher education until Well, I started it probably in my late 20s and then finished in my 40s. So I always wonder what would have life would have been like had I taken a different path. But if I was a witch, I could try I could ding it in and see what it was, but
Yeah.
I'm not a witch, so we'll never know. We'll never, never
Um,
know. But I think life happened the way it was supposed to. I think, all of those things lead to wherever you're at today. And I'm good with where I'm at today. It's
sure.
all meant to
It ain't
be,
where you're
all meant to
from.
be.
It ain't where you're from, it's where you
Yeah.
at. Right. So, yep.
Yeah. So I like where I'm at for sure. For sure. For
Cool.
sure. All right. I have a question for you. And this one, you don't have to have one specific answer. I'll let you be creative with your response here. If you could live anywhere in the world and money was not an object, where would you live?
Hmm. Um, well, I mean, for me, the easy question is or the easy answer is probably San Francisco, where I grew up. I, I love where I grew up. I know it isn't the most popular place for a lot of people for whatever reasons, but every time I go back home, I feel like I'm at home and feel energized. And I love the busyness of the city and I love, the places and the corner groceries and the different neighborhoods and things like that that just light me up, just being able to feel familiar in a place. And so that's where I would live. And especially if money was no object, because that's the reason we don't live there anymore. Right? So,
Right. Yeah, it's
but
very
if we,
expensive.
yeah, but if I had to go somewhere else other than, you know, um, home, I mean, I've always enjoyed, I always thought if I didn't live in the Bay Area or close to the Bay Area, I wouldn't mind living in Seattle. Right. I've family from Seattle. I've been to Seattle many, many times. I enjoy it. People don't necessarily like the weather, but you know, I'm, I've been to Seattle in the summer when it was in the 90s and it was awesome, right? And it was beautiful. And, I can deal with rain. I dealt with fog my entire life, right? I like wearing hoodies, so I'd be comfortable there, right? And so, but if I had to go overseas somewhere, well, maybe
Hmm.
I'd like to have a villa in in Italy, in Tuscany, and kind of just
A
be
good
able to
place.
overlook a vineyard and just be able to, just to have that space in that room. That would probably be pretty cool. Yeah. How about you?
I'm gonna give you a cop out answer. I would live nowhere. I would live everywhere. Um,
Hmm.
I love novelty. I love novelty. I love going to places I've never been before. I love exploring. I love seeing things I've never seen. I love like observing new cultures and getting the feel for like daily life. Like when I travel, I don't like go to the touristy spots. I go to where do the locals go? What do the locals do? Like that's like my favorite thing. So I have a feeling if money was not an object, I would not have like one place I would be. I would probably spend like a couple months here and then a couple months there and then a couple of months in this other place and just travel around. But Tuscany, Italy, definitely. I went to a castle there. I went to a castle in Tuscany last summer, and in getting there, I felt at home. And I said, I think I must have been royalty in a past life. I feel like I've been here before. Like this is my spot. Like I should live in a castle. So I might live in a castle somewhere. But I think I just love exploring new places. Like San Francisco, I love San Francisco. I go almost every year for my birthday. I spend my birthday there. And I try to stay in new neighborhoods every time I go. Like there's a few places that I will always go to. They're like my go-to spots in San Francisco, but I love exploring and finding new little things. And sometimes you can never find them a second time. They're there and then they're gone. And that's kind of interesting too.
Yeah.
But I think I'd be everywhere. Honestly, I think I'd
Cool.
be everywhere. soon as I felt comfortable, as soon as I'm like, oh, I know exactly what to expect today. I know whatever, I'd be like, it's time to go. Let's go find somewhere new and explore that. I
Yeah,
want to be the Anthony Bourdain, just always in a new place. That would be so awesome.
very cool. Yeah, I've I've lived in lots of different places in California. Right? I've never lived outside of
Hmm.
California. But I've spent a lot of time living in Southern California, and
Hmm.
every time I lived away from the Bay Area, I always found myself coming back to the Bay Area at
Right.
least once a month or every chance I could get. And so I just it's just my place, and I am at the end of the day, I like to travel and I like to experience things, but I also like the sense of home, and I know where I'm from, and I feel that, and so which is completely. I have a friend who she lived in she got one of those converted vans and lived and roamed during the pandemic, and she enjoyed herself and had a blast. And sounds like for some folks that would be great. I'd love to have an RV just to be able to travel and do things, but at the end of the day,
Hmm.
there's something about having an address for me that, helps me to feel grounded.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I can see that. I can see that. I don't need now. I like to have several addresses. I mean, I'm kind of living like that a little bit now. I mean, I
Yeah.
go back and forth to the two places, but um it I've never had roots. If I've grown up in California, but can I moved around a lot. Like we've stayed in like regions, but I've never like had I can't say that there's one place that I'm from because I'm from everywhere. I'm from California. I will say that. I'm from California, but I'm not from any one spot. I've lived in Central California. I've lived in Northern California. I've lived in Southern California. Like I've been all over the state. I have roots. I have some roots in Oregon. My family all lives in Oregon. So it's like I have a home in Oregon. I have everywhere, but I'm not really from anywhere.
Yeah.
I'm just wherever I'm at. And I kind of like that. I couldn't do van life. Let me tell you. I couldn't like I need comforts. Like I don't need a lot. I need a hot shower and I need a comfortable bed. If I have a hot shower and a comfortable bed and like space, I need a little bit of space. A van life, I think I'd like the idea of being in a different place all of the time, but living in a van, I can tell you I'm claustrophobic. It wouldn't work for me. I have an RV. We have an RV and we do travel in our RV, and I can do the RV for about a week, and then I'm over the RV life. I need space. I need comfort. So um yeah, but I don't need an address. I don't need an address. I'm okay with that.
Well, yeah.
Yep.
All your mail
So
is electronic.
you know what? What's funny? You know what's funny? Like, I actually don't even check my mail very often. I really don't. Like, I forget sometimes to check my mail until it's been like 3 weeks, and I'm like, oh crap, I haven't checked the mail. And I'll bring a big fat stack. And out of that big fat stack of mail, there's like maybe two things that are somewhat important. Everything else is
Yeah.
trash. So I don't need an address. Email me. Everything's digital these days. Like I can be gone forever as long as I have a spot for my deliveries to come. I get stuff at my door every day, but I don't like to check the mail. Like I don't think I check the mail very often unless I'm expecting something. And
Yeah.
anytime I do go to the mailbox, it's never good news anyways. The only people who send me letters is the dang IRS. I wish they'd lose my address, but they're always bothering me about something. Like,
Yeah.
oh, hey, we forgot we looked back at your records from 1998 and you didn't report that you got a $2 interest from your credit union. You now owe us 6,475. Not I'm dramatic, but
It adds up.
yeah, the IRS, they're always looking, they're always trying to catch me riding dirty. Tell you what.
Yeah. If I didn't have one of my clients that mail checks, then I probably wouldn't be so,
Hmm.
invested in my mail. So yeah, I hear you.
Yeah, I got you. That's it. Again, if I'm expecting something, I'll check it. Like if someone's mailing me a check, I'll do it. But other than that, to hell with it. To hell with having an address. I tell you.
Well, you have to have an address, and I'll tell you why. Because at the end of the day, when you're having a performance review, you have to be able to know where you're going to feel triumphant or to hide under your covers.
That's right.
That was a terrible transition, but it's all right.
But let's talk about performance management. Let's go
Sure.
there. It wasn't as smooth as butter, but it worked. But it worked.
Cool. So when you think of performance management, what comes to your mind?
For me, performance management comes back to how do we help ourselves and other people do the job that they're paid to do? And it comes for me in like phases. Number one, have we told people what they're supposed to do, not just by giving them a policy handbook or employee guide or whatever the case may be, but is it backed up with both like what we expect and how we really do it? The second thing I think of in performance management is, are we giving people regular feedback? Are we giving them honest feedback about their performance, both good and bad? So if they're doing things well, do we acknowledge it? If they need to improve, are we helping them do that? And then the third part of it for me is when we're doing like performance evaluations and giving people their ratings that they met or didn't meet or exceeded expectations. Um, how are we doing it? Is it fair? Is it accurate? And what are we trying to extract as an organization from those performance evaluations? Um, and I always do kind of like a plant analogy here.
Mhm.
Go on this journey with me for a moment. All right. So during the pandemic, one of the things I did to keep busy is I have a friend of mine who is really into plants, succulents, cactus, like the things that grow really well here in Southern California. I live in the desert, so things that work really well here. And so she gifted me like some cuttings from her garden, was like, here's some plants, like start a garden that'll keep you busy. And I said, okay, sounds good. Well, it became a bit of an obsession, and I have tons of plants now, more than I probably should, but here I am. Um, and so one of the things about like plants and succulents is that they are pretty resilient, but they don't all need the same thing. So if I plant this garden, of course, the goal is to have like live, luscious plants with beautiful blooms that surround you with beauty and, enjoyment. If one of my plants is not thriving, I don't look at the plant and say, what the hell's wrong with this plant? Why isn't it growing? Look at all I've done for it, you know? So when I'm looking at my plant, I have to do some analysis. I have to look at it and say, why is this plant not thriving? Does it need water? Does it have too much water? Is it getting too much light? Is it not getting enough light? Does it need fertilizer, or did I give it too much fertilizer? What does this particular plant need? And so the first thing I do is I look at the environment and try to eliminate any environmental causes of this plant not thriving versus just blaming the plant. And from a leadership perspective, I think about this, and this is why I like this analogy, because if I have an employee who's not thriving, how often are leaders like, this employee's just not motivated, they're not dedicated, they don't they're not smart enough, they're not, dedicated enough, and it becomes like an employee issue. But are we looking at the environment and asking ourselves, what are the conditions for this? Like, not everybody needs the same thing. So am I looking at, are they getting recognition or too much recognition? Are they getting, the right feedback or not enough feedback? Or they work in a fast-paced environment, we have them in a slow, but like, what are we looking at in terms of like the environment to see how will this person thrive? Because it may not be the person, just like it's not the plant, it's the conditions. And so how do I look at the conditions and make sure that this person's in the right place to thrive? So that's where I kind of make that connection. And in like the people world of it, we're too quick to blame the employee for having challenges. We in performance management, we have to step back and look at the big picture and almost like run a diagnostic. What's going on? What can we fix to help this person do better? And again, not everybody needs the same thing. Like I can have two, like right now, I can tell you right now, I have two plants that are sitting right next to each other. I water them the same, they're getting the same amount of light. One of them is like living its best life. The other one is like, why do you hate me? And I'm like really trying to through trial and error find out what does this one plant need, because it's a beautiful, great plant. It's just not doing well, but it's right next to another plant getting the same thing that's just taking off. Like they're all everybody's different. Every plant is different. How do we look at the environment and come up with the right solution so that everybody can thrive? That's what I think about in performance management.
Yeah, so providing that environment, right? So that's a great definition, right? And so it's proactive, right? It's where we are anticipating the environment that that plant or that person is in, and how do we help them maximize their
Mhm.
potential to grow, right? To
Right,
grow into whatever succulent they end up growing into, right? Or,
right.
whatever. I mean, and so there's different outcomes for different people, like you said. I mean, I had a performance management meeting one time where I was told by my boss, well, I just have to I've come to the grips that um I come to grips with the fact that you're just not ambitious.
Mhm.
And so I was confused, right? A couple years after I got my PhD and working, I said, so what do you mean? She goes, well, you're not ambitious. I said, well, why would I not be ambitious? What do you mean? What's telling you that I'm not ambitious? And she said, well, you don't want my job. And, I was a traveling trainer at the time. And I said, okay, well, yeah, you're right. I don't want your job. I, I get to be out and work with folks and train and travel to different places. And, it's a cool life. It's the lifestyle that I
Mhm.
like. I don't want to be holed up in an office, you know, coordinating different things that other people get to do.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, it's true. I do want my job. I do like my job and don't want your job. Well, that's just not ambition, right? And so she was measuring me on what she thought a ambitious person would want, right? Which was basically her idea of what she thought, climbing the corporate ladder, right? Making the most amount of money, having the most power. And me, it was about, you know, what I was doing, that I was enjoying what I was doing. And, we talked a little bit about competitiveness. I want to be the best that I can be. It doesn't really matter to me what other people are doing as long as I'm able to. It doesn't matter to me. I've had people say, "Oh, you have, you're one of our, you know, top trainers that we schedule. Great, awesome, right?" But I don't say, "Well, who's ahead of me?" Right? It's not about that. It's I'm making enough to be able to pay my bills. Okay, cool, right? And so as long as that's still something that's important, it doesn't matter to me if I'm the top trainer or if I'm in the top three or if I'm in the top 25. I mean, I don't know how that works and I care less how that works. I just want to know that I get the same workload and if I can increase that, great, but I don't need to know where I rank or where I stand, right? And so that idea of ambition, a lot of people who maybe are a little older than us, they grew up in that time where ambition meant upward mobility, right?
Yeah.
And so coming into an organization, you have a chance for advancement. And advancement very often meant pay raises, increase in influence, right? And that's just what the thought was. You work your way up the corporate ladder. And my thought was, how do I make more money and work less?
Same,
So,
same.
and what I'm finding is that that's not as easy as I thought it was when I was a kid, because, yeah, I mean, if you have a good lifestyle, it means that you're pretty busy, right? And so, but at the same time, I'm busy doing the things that I love doing, right? I know people who come home pissed off every day. I can't stand this job, and I'm working overtime, and I'm making tons of money, and I can't stand it, and you don't know what to tell them because, yeah, I'm working hard, and and it's long and it's exhausting, but when I'm there, I'm in my zone. I love it,
Yeah.
right? And so it's I think my ambition was to be the best that I could be at what it is that I want to be, right? And so, how can you, if you are measuring my performance, how can you help me get there, right? That's what I want to know, right? In performance management, because how I want to get there may not be exactly where I want to be, is may not be exactly where Tiff wants to be
Right.
or Joe wants to be, right? It doesn't matter, right? None of that. We have different goals in life. I mean, if you have somebody who doesn't want to be a supervisor, is perfectly happy being a worker three and is maxed out in where they are. And does that mean that they're not ambitious or they're not effective? Maybe they really like what they do. And money isn't necessarily something that motivates them or that they need any more of.
Well, so let me share with you. I worked with the county far, far away. That's always try to keep them anonymous, but I was working
Oh,
with a
you were in
leadership
Trek?
team.
You were in Trek, far, far away? Yeah, I didn't
Yes,
know they
far,
had a
far
county.
away.
I didn't know
So
they had a
yes,
county
far,
office.
far
Okay,
away
go ahead.
county.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I was in this county far, far away, and I was working with their executive management team. I have like this ongoing like like leadership check-in that we do with all of their director, their managers, and their supervisors for this particular department. And one of the challenges that we were working on a couple years ago was succession planning. And this is a very small department, maybe 100 people, very dedicated to their work. And so one of the managers was the concern was, we have these vacancies coming in these positions like analysts, management, and we don't have anybody from the front line that can take on these positions. And it's not because they don't have the qualifications, they don't have like the desire, they don't want to promote. And that was very foreign. She was really struggling with that concept of, I can't understand why people would not want to promote. And so it made me think about this chapter in the book, Radical Candor by Kim Scott. I don't know if you read it or not, but it's a great book. And she really talked about the concept of the difference between rising stars and superstars. And I always think superstar from that movie. I don't even remember what the movie's called, but I don't know. The the
It's
rising
called
stars and the
Superstar.
superstar.
Yeah.
It is super. Okay, there you go. But superstars are people who are really just thriving in the position that they're in with no desire to do anything else. They enjoy the job, they get value from it, they're making enough economically where it makes sense for them. They're not looking for those positions of, like you said, the ambition of growing into something else because they're very happy and content with where they're at. That is not a character flaw for them to want to stay. Like I, for example, have no desire to go any farther beyond in my organization than I am right now. I'm super happy with what I'm doing. I have
Mhm.
no interest in taking on any additional responsibility. I'm a superstar, right? But then rising stars are the opposite of that. These are people who are looking to promote, they are looking to increase their influence or their skill set or their power structure, or even just, again, the financial aspect of it, where they have skills that would make them better in a more strategic role versus a technical role. And they are positioning themselves, and they're the rising stars, the ones that will move up through the organization. But their people are not the same. And there's nothing wrong with either. The challenge is when leaders try to put people in a different position than what they're there for. Like I'm a superstar. I'm going to stay where I'm at because I like it here. I have no interest in doing anything beyond that. So if you kept pushing me to promote or to do something else, I might leave. Because leave me alone. I'm just trying to come to work and do my job and mind my own business. I don't want to be involved in all the rest of it. And the same is true if you have someone who is a rising star and they have potential and they have ambition, but we keep them because they're really good at this work and we never promote them, then they're going to also feel resentful and probably go somewhere else. And so it's finding that balance between like recognizing what people have or what they bring or what their choices and desires are. Where do they want to be? but also like keeping in mind that you need both. You need superstars and rising stars because people do leave. People in leadership do move on, or they retire, or they start their own business, or they find another position. We do have to fill those vacancies. How do we keep people ready for it, but making sure it's the right people that go to the right places? And I think that's an important thing for leaders to understand as well. It's not like it was. And people sometimes are not ambitious. And that doesn't mean that they're not dedicated, that they're not engaged. It's just, I'm not interested.
Yeah.
And some people, can I just say, are so competitive. And this is another like challenge where they're so afraid of someone promoting that will be better than them that they try to keep people small so that they can maintain their status. And so they have people who are rising stars that they try to fizzle out so that they could maintain their status, or it becomes like the competition. Like I know exactly what you're talking about in terms of like, I know I'm a top producer, but I don't really like care where I'm at. Like I ran into an instructor on the streets, a very popular one. I won't say his or her or their name, but I ran into them randomly and I knew who they were because I've heard of them, and they're pretty well known in our circle. And I went and introduced myself, and this person gave me like the 1-2 look and was like, well, how many days a year do you work? And I was like, I don't know. I don't count how many days I work. And this person was like, well, I do about 155 days a year. And I was like, awesome. Like, that's awesome. Like, I have no idea. Like, honestly, I couldn't tell you how many days a year I work. I don't know. I have no idea. I just know I'm happy to be in the place I'm supposed to be when I'm there. So that competitiveness, or sometimes like in order for me to keep my status, I've got to keep you down. That can happen even in performance evaluations where maybe you have a leader who is evaluating the performance of someone who's doing really well, but there's a status, like a fear of status. If I give this person a great evaluation, that might empower them to maybe leave this job or to some maybe surpass me. So I got to keep them humble. Let me give them a meat. Like that can be their undoing as well.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I mean, look, that goes back to that conversation. Why do people get promoted? Right? Why do people seek promotion? Right? And a couple different reasons usually, right? They get promoted very often because they're very good at what they do.
Yep.
Right? So if you're our star performer, you're our star auditor. So because you're our star auditor, we're going to put you in a position where you can manage other auditors, and just from the power of your influence and your chime, you're going to make them better auditors, right?
Mm-hmm.
Auditing is a skill set. Accounting is a skill set. Teaching is a skill set, right? And it's a different skill set than leadership,
Yep.
right? And so just because you're the best at something doesn't mean that you naturally have the talent or the wherewithal or the skill set to just automatically be an effective leader, right? But then also sometimes people are just the next man up, the next person up. Oh, well, this
Mm-hmm.
person's retiring. You've been here 20 years, so it makes sense that you're the leader. Sometimes, through attrition, right? We run out of people. You have to be the leader. And then all of a sudden, well, you're the leader because, you're the last one left and we have to make it permanent. So, you've been doing a okay job. You're listening to everything. Everything we're telling you to do, you're doing. So,
That's what happened to my husband. That's how he
yeah,
became a manager of his plant. He had been there, and not to say he didn't have a skill set though. I don't want to be like,
yeah,
oh, he was just the only one there. But he had been doing the job. He was doing really well. He had been managing himself and his whole department without a manager for I don't know how long. And so they were like, we have to fill this vacancy. You're going to be the new manager. He's like, the hell I am. I don't want to be a manager. I have zero interest in doing it. They're
right,
like, you're pretty much already doing it. We're just going to give you the title. And he's like, yeah, but I don't want it. I don't want to do it. Like, I
yeah,
don't want to be the manager. And so, like, okay, so this is what we're going to do. You're either going to keep doing your job at the pay that you're at, or we're going to hire somebody who's going to tell you how to do your job. And you're going to have to listen to them. And he's like, I guess, but I'm not interviewing. So he ended up taking it, but it was really funny because he went in there and was like, I'm going to negotiate my salary. If you want me to manage, this is what I want. And they were like, okay. He was like, okay, I should ask for more.
Yeah.
And so he did. He ended up like leaning into it. He had no management experience whatsoever. I said, don't worry, I got you. I will be your personal leadership coach. And so I would work with him because he's really good at the work part of it. People is not his jam. He's not a people person. So I really had to help him like navigate like the people leadership part, which is my forte. And he did just fine. He did
Mhm.
just fine and ended up growing that company so much that they had to move out of state because they outgrew their facility.
Mhm.
So he was a great manager. I think he had a great leadership coach, but but I mean, it was again, not everybody wants to be in charge, and ambitious people don't necessarily understand that.
Mhm. Yeah, upward ambition, right?
Yeah, yeah,
So yeah. So, you have those folks that are talented at what they did before, next person up, they've been there the longest. People are going to leave because they have an opportunity to make more money, right? I've seen this in for-profit agencies I've worked at where people will leave because they have a chance to make more money at another place. And so instead of them leaving, how can we, raise their pay? Well, the only way is if we make them a manager. So let's go ahead and do that. Right. And so, I mean, there's so many different reasons why people become leaders without necessarily expressing the idea or fully understanding the idea and responsibilities of
yeah,
leadership. And so, just thinking about how those folks are in positions to influence their staff and to influence their staff's future. And like you said, if somebody is super competitive, they're in it for the wrong reasons. Very often they can stifle the development of somebody,
yeah.
right? And I mean, we know it's one of the top drivers of attrition from a job is lack of development, right? To
Mm-hmm.
feel like you're not growing. But if you
Right.
think growth means promotion, and you tell that person, well, there's nowhere to grow here because that no one's leaving and everyone's, all the managers are in their 40s, and just things like that, right? You can, stifle somebody's growth as opposed to, so what is it that you really want to do? Where do you want to go from here? Where do you see yourself in 5 years? You see yourself here. Okay, so how are you feeling about, what you're doing now? How can we help you to be better at what you're doing? Right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is a different conversation than what a lot of people are used to doing. I mean, when we are effective with performance management, just looking at, what SHRM talks about. SHRM, Site of Human Resources Management, talks about when you are effective in performance management, you're clarifying people's job responsibilities and expectations that we think about, right? But effective performance management enhances their productivity, right? And it's not always through threats. It's not always through incentives, right?
Right.
When people are treated well, right, they will be more productive. We've already seen that. And building their capabilities, it keeps people around. It produces improved production and improved retention, right? And if we are creating performance management goals that go in line with what we talked about in the last episode, with our vision and values and mission of the organization, they're going to be, you know, pointed towards being productive, right? And really, if we do this well, this is something we can go back to and say, these are the reasons why we are making decisions in terms of, team leads or interim managers or, you know, um, in the private sector, giving out, bonuses or pay increases, right? And it really can be helpful if we have that leg to stand on based off of hard data and clear expectations where that data backs that up, which, also, improves our communication skills, right? We
Mm-hmm.
we have better communication with our managers. One thing I hate more than anything is being in organizations where performance management meetings are maybe twice a year,
Mm-hmm.
right? I was working for a bank and I was talking to them about performance management and the practices that we had. We had three formal meetings per year, but we also recommended as best practice that you meet with your staff once a month for an hour. Since then, that has been updated. Harvard Business Review says best practices right now is meeting with your staff um, weekly for half an hour, one-on-one meetings, which can be difficult for folks who have a lot of staff, right? Or people who talk about how busy they are. But that's best practices. But just having that once a month conversation. So when we left at the end of the meeting, one guy he looked at the other guy. They're both in IT. He said, "So what was this performance management he was talking about?" So that thing we did over at HP, there where we talk to people twice a year. And oh, okay, so we have to do that here. Yeah. And it wasn't, and nothing else that I mentioned, nothing else that I talked about had landed. And it just made me think, wow, this is a further conversation rather than just this half an hour understanding of what you need to do to accomplish this, to check off the box, right? And if we do that, it becomes performative. I mean, we have situations where people, I once had a boss who said, I'm not giving anybody higher than a 3. Everyone's equal in my part, in my eyes. You all do the same job, right? At the end of the day, no one's any better than anybody else. And that was her personal feeling. So everyone got a 3. Everyone meets expectations. So what does that do to personal, like if you're ambitious in terms of being the best that you can be and motivated and engaged, what does that do to your level of wanting to do better? But then I've also had people who gave everyone a 5. Well, my people are the top, they're the best, right? And so they should be the highest rated because we are the best. And so I give them the full bonus and I give them the full, raises. And so where do they have to go from there? Right.
Yeah. So I am also highly perturbed by the rating systems that are arbitrary. If you're given it, if it like I've worked in county governments for most of my life, and I have heard like it's impossible to get a 5. Nobody gets a 5. If that's the case, take it off the damn evaluation. If you're never
Sure.
going to give it to anybody, why is it there?
Right.
The second part of this, when I think about it from a high performer, I'm a traditionally high performer, sometimes a judgmental high performer, but nonetheless, I'm competitive, so I always like to try to be the best in my field, whatever that looks like. And I'm not competing with anybody else. I'm competing with me, and I'm competing with the expectations. And so, if you tell me that I should be able to do 10, I want to do 15 because I want to challenge myself to again be a high performer. So if that's the case, if I'm doing consistently above and beyond what's expected of me, and you tell me I'm meeting expectations, I'm going to feel some kind of way about that, especially in public service, because we don't get bonuses. We're not going to get additional funds. You don't get incentives to do better. And so the only reward that I get is the satisfaction of knowing that you're recognizing my hard work. And I know for myself, because it's important to me for it to be documented that I'm going above and beyond. I don't want a participation trophy if I'm not doing the work. I'm always going to earn whatever it is. But I know one year I remember my boss, I don't know what was wrong with her. She was all over the place. And so some days she'd be like, "Oh my God, you're the best employee I've ever had." And then the next day I'd say good morning to her and she'd like bark at me. I could never like know where she was or where I stood with her. It was really confusing. So nonetheless, I um, remember her giving me my performance evaluation, and she says, "Here you go, sign it and give it back to me." Like we didn't even go over it or anything, but here it is, sign it. And so I'm looking at it, and I'm like, actually, I've exceeded in these areas, and here's some proof, right? So here are some of the ways that I feel like I deserve a higher rating. And she's like, I've already gone through management. I'm not changing it. And I said, no, you are changing it because this is not reflective of my performance. This is where I've exceeded. And it wasn't very many places. It was maybe like 3 areas where I felt like I was underrated. And so she said she wasn't going to change it. So I went right to her managers and I'm like, look, this is my performance over the year. Here's why I'm justifying that there should be a higher rating. This was the expectation. Here are all the ways I've exceeded it. I really think that this should be reflected in my performance evaluation. And I had, again, documentation of all of this. And lo and behold, she came back later on that afternoon and threw it at me and said, "There, you win." I said, "Thank you very much." And lo and behold, I randomly got switched to another team like a couple weeks later. It was really weird. I don't know where it came from. So, so in this sense, as the employee, when I'm thinking about fairness and equity and making sure that we're all playing by the same rules when it comes specifically to performance evaluations, which again, performance management, it all, like culminates in this performance evaluation. Um, I think the first step is helping put measurable, unbiased, objective outcomes for how do you get these particular ratings. So that we can be applied where we avoid the challenges of like, well, this supervisor says I'm only giving threes and this one says I'm going to give everybody fives, where it becomes like an equal measure. And this is hard to quantify in some areas. Like, for example, taking initiative. I see that on almost every performance evaluation, taking initiative. But what does that actually mean? Like, how do I exceed in taking initiative? How do I not exceed in taking initiative? And then if you're giving me feedback that contradicts the performance evaluation, then it gets really confusing. So again, in that taking initiative example, if you're saying I'm evaluating you on taking initiative, but every time I try something new, you say, who told you you could do that? Where does it say you can do that? Then you're not rewarding me for taking initiative, you're punishing me for taking initiative. And now I'm confused, like, what do you want me to do? And now it becomes like this blank performative thing, meets because we can't
Right.
fire you, meets because we can't promote you. And that becomes like completely demoralizing. Now, some people don't care about performance evaluations. There are people who are like, I don't give a crap about it. I just sign it every year. It doesn't matter to me. But for other people, it really does matter because that's the only record of their hard work. And so it is important. For me, it's important. Although I will say, I work in an organization that I haven't had an evaluation since I've been there, and I've been there like 8 years, and I've never had a performance evaluation, not one time.
Yeah.
So I don't know where I stand. I guess they keep giving me work, so I guess I'm doing okay. But there's no feedback, so
Yeah.
I don't know.
Except for, the feedback from classes, but they're always, hey, we love Tiff. I mean, shouldn't we hear you're doing great, right? So
Right, right.
yeah, some other things, when I think about that idea of performance management, you mentioned, what is it that we want to know, right? Especially if we're in government service or in the public sector where there aren't necessarily, year-end bonuses or,
Mhm.
merit-based pay increases, right? There's a couple things, people want to know, like you mentioned, that if I contribute to the organization's success, I'll be recognized,
Yeah.
right? And that my performance is evaluated fairly,
Hmm.
right? Which is different than everyone gets a three because that's not fair.
Right.
Some people are
It's
threes,
not.
some people are fours, some people are twos, some people are 0.5s, right? And so, um, that my manager lets me know where I stand.
Hmm.
One of the biggest issues with having those semi-annual meetings, end of year meetings, is that if you're not told how you're doing, you're walking into a pop quiz.
Right.
And you get into situations where people hold stuff that maybe you haven't done or that happened in March and are evaluating you in November based off of what happened in March and have not set any parameters, or this is where you are in March, you have a chance to improve. So if I'm here in March and I'm here in April and I'm here in May and I'm here in June, if I know that you're noticing my progression, I'm going to feel better. I'm going to feel like
Right.
I'm being recognized for my good work, right? And that, the only time people are being recognized is when their work is shoddy, right? Or they're not meeting expectations, right? And that my goals are aligned to organizational goals. So being reminded what you're doing here helps. If your goal is to create a better community for your county, what you do provides this opportunity for this improved county. And that's something that is in the front of the mind of the worker, right? And that
Hmm.
they're empowered to decide how to get their work done, which is
Yeah.
so important, right? People have that idea of how to get things done, but how you get things done might be completely different than how I get things done,
Right.
right? I had a manager for a state agency tell me I can't stand one of my direct reports. I said, what do you mean? He said, well, he just frustrates me all the time. I said, well, why? And she said, well, because he doesn't do things the right way. I said, okay, so what is he doing? Well, he's providing something that, that has to be done. Okay, so when is it due? Every day. Okay, cool. So is he having problems getting that done every day? No, he gets it done every day. He gets it done, if it's done by 3 o'clock, he gets it done by 3 o'clock. I said, okay, so what's the challenge? What's the challenge? Well, he just doesn't do it right. When I come in, I focus on it and do a little bit, of the task until 3 o'clock, and then I have it done. He always waits till like 2 o'clock and then does it all at once. I said, okay, well, is this an issue with performance? What performance issues are you saying? He always gets it done. Okay, so there's not an issue with him meeting the deadline. The issue is how he is getting it done. Well, yeah, I just don't see how he can get it done in the way that he does it. I just don't understand it. It doesn't make sense to me. So because it doesn't make sense to her that he is being productive, to her, he is a unproductive employee who is very productive,
Right.
right? And it's a
Right.
personal preference. This is how you should do things. You're not doing it this way, then you are wrong,
Yeah.
right? And how does that show up in performance reviews,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And so
Yeah.
these are
Sorry,
things
I didn't
where
mean.
it's okay if, remember, it's like we talked about, it's not about us. How do we get out of our own way to be able to allow people to shine in the way that they shine?
Right. Well, so this is where it goes back to like that first part of it is how do we set clear expectations? What's really important to you? So, really defining and creating clarity around, again, the expectations. I'm going to use punctuality as an example because I was late for
Yeah,
work for about 12 years. Okay.
yeah,
I was late for work for 12 years. I'm good now. I've overcome that challenge. But, in the counties where I worked, being late or not being at time at your start time was kind of the norm. Like it was kind of funny because if you came to the office maybe 10 minutes before the day started, it was a ghost town. There was like four people there. And so if
hmm
you came in at like when we opened at 8 o'clock, you would see people jamming in the parking lot, all day. It's really funny. And this is, by the way, in government, again, I can't say it's true for every county, but there's this one particular county that I visit that there's two buildings. There's one here and then there's a big one in the back. I almost always train at the one in the front. And I have to wait for someone to come open the door. And I always try to get there like 45 minutes early before my class starts. So while I'm standing at the door waiting for someone to open it, I can see all of the employees like coming around the corner. And I laugh because it looks like Fast and Furious Tokyo Drift. That's like what I see every time because you see all these cars in unison, shoom, 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 like shooting around this corner to get to the building in the back. And it's like 8:07 at this point. So it's like funny because most people start at 8 o'clock. So being on time, if you look at any like employee handbook, it'll probably have something to the effect of all employees must be at their desk and ready to work by their scheduled start time. Like that's the written expectation. But the other part of this is it reinforced? Is it something that people are really held accountable to? And I can tell you for my first 12 years, not really. Because I could show up at 8:04, 8:08, 8:17 with my iced coffee. I'm like, congratulations, I'm here. And it was not really frowned upon. I mean, I would get talked to every now and then, like, oh, I noticed you were late today. And I'm like, yeah, well, I beat you here. So what's the big deal? But I remember like a specific time where I was getting super annoyed, which again, I have to admit, like this was my thing. Like I was a high performer, so I'm like, I always get my work done. What do you care if I come in a few minutes late? Like, what's the big deal? I realize like it is a big deal, but nonetheless, at the time, I remember feeling very like rebellious a little bit about the being on time thing because I'm more focused. My timeliness is not important to me, but productivity is. And so when my boss was like, you have to be here by 8 o'clock, you have to be ready to work at 8 o'clock. I said, all right, cool. I don't want to cause any problems. I'll be here at 8 o'clock. But in my rebellious 15-year-old mindset that I had, I said, I'm going to be on time at work, but I'm not going to start working until everybody else starts working. So I'll be in the building, but I'm going to wait until my lead, which I had a lead worker that sat like right on the other side of me. We called them seniors. We had a senior who worked right next to me. Um, and I said, when he finishes his coffee and his chit chat and his oatmeal and all the other stuff that he does in the morning, when he starts working, I will start working. And I would sit at my desk in all my rebelliousness and waited till he picked up the phone or made his first phone call or turned his computer on. And then once he started, I would start. I would be there for 45 minutes to an hour doing nothing out of spite. Out of spite. You want me to be here on time? I'll be here on time. But I'm not working until everybody starts working. And so that's where, again, performance management, we look at it like, what are we reinforcing? What are we encouraging? Are we setting clear expectations? And clarity is, again, not just putting in writing, but what's reinforced. Because I guarantee you, if the culture of that organization had been like, you come to work, you get here by your start time and you start work, then I probably would have been doing it. But it's like, you're so insistent that I'm in the building, even though as soon as I get there at 8:08, my computer's on and I'm hustling as I sip my iced coffee. I'm hustling and I'm listening to people who are there, but just again, sipping on their coffee, making their oatmeal, chit chatting, and I'm working. So, what do you care if I come in 8 minutes late when these people are there, but wasting time? Like, where's the balance there? Where's the balance? And so, I can't say I handled it well, but I got over it. I did my little social experiment for a bit, but given my, like, I got to work, I don't want to be here wasting my time. I got over it. I got over it, started coming to work on time, and now I'm on time all the time. I haven't been late in a long time.
It's
But again,
legitimate.
12 years.
It's a legitimate perception, a legitimate um, observation, and a legitimate response.
Can
If
I tell you
I'm
though, real
bust,
fast?
yeah,
Can I just tell you real quick? Guess
yeah,
what I got on all of my performance evaluations when it came to punctuality, even though I was late for work for 12 years? What do you think my performance evaluation said?
exceeds expectations.
I just met expectations. Never any discipline, never any penalty, which reinforced the idea that it was okay to come to work late. Even though the policy said you had to be there on time, the behavior was, I'm so glad you showed up.
Yeah,
I'm glad you made it at 8:17 with your iced coffee. So there was no behavior change because my performance management said that that was acceptable.
yeah.
Yeah.
There's a county that I did a supervisor class with, and the staff development person said, one of the things you can emphasize with our supervisors is when they talk about punctuality with their staff and then they walk in 5, 10 minutes late, or they come in from a doctor's appointment they didn't tell anybody about half an hour later, you know, that they're not upholding their end of the bargain,
Yep.
right? And so you can talk about expectations all you want. If you aren't backing them up with actions, then it's just lip service,
Yep.
right? And
Yes.
so it really is important. But yeah, I mean, if I get there, if you tell me I have to be there on time and I'm getting there on time and I'm doing everything I can to make sure that I'm punctual, and then the person next to me doesn't start their day for the next 45 minutes, and that's an everyday occurrence, what message are you sending me? It's okay
Right.
not to be productive. It's okay
Right.
not to get things done. It's okay to do things half-ass,
Right.
right? And so, if we're not, and that's holding people accountable. Holding people accountable is not writing them up and slapping their hands all the time. It's making sure people understand these are the expectations, and this is what you're going to be judged on in terms of your performance is the expectations we have and how consistent you meet those expectations. The other
Right.
thing to think about though is what type of expectations do we have, right? We have performance expectations, sure, but in your experience, most most of the expectations that we have for performance are, like we talked about in the last class, data,
Mm-hmm.
stats,
Mm-hmm.
hitting our numbers, hitting our requirements, right? So that's, doing the job, right? That's whatever is on the job duties, right? But What about the skills and abilities, right? The behavioral objectives. What, to effectively engage with folks? How do you rate somebody on that? To be engaged, right? To be positive, or to, perform our duties with enthusiasm and alacrity. How do we measure those? And a lot of times people don't know how to measure them, so they don't get measured. And so what are people measured on? Meeting their goals or not, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And that can, if you're a people person and you spend a lot of time building, I can tell you, I sanctioned a whole lot of people, right? We talked about sanctions in the last class. If somebody in human services, somebody doesn't participate, then they get part of their grant taken away until they participate. And I've
Time
sanctioned
out.
a whole, yeah, they put them on timeout. Yeah. And I've sanctioned a whole lot of people. I never had anybody come back and be mad at me about the sanction that they had, because I did everything I could to try to keep them out of sanction and try to engage with them and give them the benefit of the doubt very often, and really allow them to be the master of their fate rather than me
Hmm.
creating this expectation that they can't live up to. Right. And so,
Right.
if you can be fair with people and you can let people, I'm trying to support you as much as I can. And if it's not happening, how can we fix it? Right. That's something that's important. But how many managers just don't have that conversation? Oh, I got this problem employee. Well, when's the last time you talked to them? I don't know. A couple months ago. They always try to avoid me. And so it's just annoying. And I've got too many other people that I've got to take care of that are working hard. And so, I just don't know what to do about this person. Okay, well, that one person who's being ignored for not holding their end of the bargain, you think they're being completely ignored? Not usually. Everyone else in that office is like, don't be like him, or don't be like
Yeah.
her, or she just gets away with that stuff. And like we talked about with engagement, right? If 30% of our folks are engaged and 18% of our folks are actively disengaged, where they're trying to blow up the place, that leaves 50% of our staff that can go either way,
Yeah.
right? And if we're not motivating them in a positive way, which way do you think they're going to see? What are they going to talk about? They're going to nag and complain about the people who aren't holding their end of the bargain. And who usually has to keep up with those folks who are low performers? The high performers. And what happens to the high performers? Well, don't do anything over what you're supposed to do here, because they'll just give you more work. And that becomes your culture. This concludes part one of our episode. Stay tuned for part two, coming Tuesday to all major podcast platforms.